So let's start with the part of this headline that sounds the most impressive, and also turns out to be the slipperiest. Japan has the lowest electric bills in the G7. That sounds like a clean, simple fact. It sounds measurable. It sounds like somebody lined up 7 countries, looked at 7 utility bills, and Japan came out on top. But that is not really how this works. Because the second you look closer, you run into a basic problem. Electricity price is not the same thing as electricity bill. An electricity bill is not the same thing as total home energy cost. Those are 3 different things, and a lot of viral content smashes them together like they mean the same thing. They do not. Official international comparisons I found are mostly about domestic electricity prices, while Japan's own official statistics separately track household spending. That is not the same as a clean apples-to-apples G7 monthly bill ranking. A country can have relatively high electricity prices and still have households using less electricity overall, because homes are smaller, fewer rooms are conditioned, or less electricity is used for heating. Another country can have cheaper electricity per unit and still produce fatter monthly bills because the homes are larger, the climate is harsher, or people are cooling and heating much more space. The IEA also notes that homes often use different fuels for different loads, which makes electricity-only comparisons even messier. So no, I am not comfortable saying Japan simply has the lowest electric bills in the G7 as a clean fact. That claim is stronger than the evidence. But here is the interesting part. Even if the headline is shaky, it is pointing at something real. Because when you dig into how Japanese agencies and utilities talk about saving energy, the pattern is not, we have magically cheap electricity. The pattern is, don't waste heating and cooling in the first place. Don't condition space you are not using. Don't let summer heat blast through your windows for free. Don't let winter drafts force your heater to fight the outdoors all day. Japan's Ministry of the Environment has promoted cool biz and warm biz for years, while utilities like Kansai Electric and TEPCO repeatedly point people back to curtains, blinds, shading, and window-focused measures. And that is the pivot for this whole video. The better question is not, does Japan have the cheapest power? The better question is, why do so many practical Japanese energy-saving tips start at the window, the draft, and the room you're actually sitting in? Because that is where this gets useful, not in some fake leaderboard, in the small, boring, overlooked places where your home quietly bleeds comfort every single day. And that leads to the real story. A lot of what Japan does differently comes down to one idea. Comfort is often managed by zone, by timing, and by sunlight exposure, instead of by brute forcing the entire house all at once. That sounds tiny, almost too tiny. But this is where the mindset shift happens. In a lot of homes, the default logic is basically this. Set one temperature, blast the whole house toward it, and keep doing that until the bill arrives. The Japanese guidance I found tends to ask a different first question. Where are you actually spending time, and what is making that space uncomfortable? That is why you keep seeing the same themes over and over. Not buy a miracle machine. Not replace your whole house tomorrow. But things like dress for the season, avoid conditioning empty rooms, block heat before it enters, and gather in the rooms that are easiest to keep comfortable. Japan's Ministry of the Environment has long promoted 28 degrees C summer settings through cool biz and 20 degrees C winter settings through warm biz, while also encouraging cool sharing and warm sharing instead of heating or cooling separate spaces unnecessarily. Now, that does not mean every Japanese home actually sits at those exact temperatures. It does not mean everybody loves those numbers, and it definitely does not mean this works equally well in every climate or every building. What it means is that the official mindset itself is different. The framing is not, make the thermostat do everything. The framing is, use energy where it matters, and stop wasting it where it does the least good. And once you hear it that way, you start noticing how much money gets burned maintaining comfort in empty cubic footage. Guest rooms, hallways, unused bedrooms, corners of the home nobody is sitting in. A lot of houses are paying to maintain comfort in spaces that are basically unoccupied. The Japanese guidance keeps circling back to the occupied zone instead. But the part I think is even more useful is this. Japanese utility advice does not stop at thermostat settings. It keeps pointing back to the window. Kansai Electric recommends blinds and curtains to reduce heat coming in from outside so the air conditioner does not have to work as hard. TEPCO says similar things, including exterior shading, blinds, and heat shield film on windows in summer. That is a huge clue because it tells you where the battle is being fought. Not just at the AC unit, at the glass, at the sunlight, at the first place heat enters the room. And physically, that makes perfect sense. If the sun is pouring through a window and turning the room into a greenhouse, then lowering the thermostat is basically treating the symptom after the damage is already happening. But if you block that heat before it enters, now the AC is not playing catch-up all afternoon. same comfort, less work. Or at least closer to it. That is also why this Japanese approach can feel smarter than a lot of generic save energy advice. Generic advice usually starts at the machine. Use the AC less, use the heater less, turn the number down, turn the number up. This approach starts one step earlier. Why is the room hard to keep comfortable in the first place? Is the sun hitting the glass? Is the room empty most of the day? Are you conditioning way more space than you actually use? Are you letting outside conditions win before your equipment even gets a fair shot? And that brings us to the part viewers actually care about. What is the closest thing to a real cheap home fix here? It is not a magic gadget. It is not some secret Japanese device nobody else knows about. And it is definitely not one universal product that fixes every bad power bill. The honest answer is much less flashy and way more useful. The cheapest meaningful fix is usually some form of window and draft control. That could be weather stripping, it could be caulk, it could be a draft stopper, it could be better use of blinds and curtains, it could be exterior shading, it could be inexpensive heat control film on the right kind of window. The exact tool changes, but the principle stays the same. Stop losing the fight at the edges of the room. Due Guidance backs this up directly by recommending air sealing, caulking, and weather stripping as cost-effective ways to reduce heating and cooling losses. And Japanese utilities point to the same weak spots from the window side. And this is where a lot of people waste money without realizing it. They think the problem is the air conditioner, or the heater, or the thermostat setting. But sometimes the real problem is that the room is leaking comfort faster than the system can maintain it. So the machine runs longer, harder, and more often. And you blame the bill on expensive electricity when the larger issue is that the building is making the equipment do extra work all day. DOE is pretty direct, that simple air sealing measures often have quick payback, which is why these boring fixes show up so often in serious efficiency advice. Now this is the point where viral videos usually oversell it. They will say something like, "This 4 trick cuts your bill instantly," as if one strip of foam is about to turn a drafty house into a high-performance building. That is not how this works. A cheap fix helps most when it matches the actual problem. If your issue is a leaky door, weather stripping can be great. If your issue is brutal afternoon sun blasting through a west-facing window, blinds, reflective film, or exterior shading might do more than fiddling with a thermostat ever will. If your issue is a large, under-insulated home with weak windows everywhere, cheap fixes can still help, but they are a patch, not a cure. DOE guidance supports the patches, while Japan's own building policy material makes clear that better windows and better envelopes still matter at a deeper level. That is the honest version viewers almost never hear. Small fixes are strongest when the weakness is local. One drafty door, one overheated room, one bedroom that never stays warm, one window that turns your office into a greenhouse. That is where a few dollar fix stops being clickbait and starts being smart. There are basically 3 levels here. The first level is the 5-minute stuff. Close curtains before the sun hits the glass, use blinds properly, block obvious drafts at the bottom of doors, and stop treating windows like neutral surfaces. They are not neutral. They are active participants in your power bill. Japanese utility guidance says this directly. The second level is the cheap hardware fix. Weather stripping around doors and operable windows, caulking stationary gaps, maybe adding inexpensive film where it makes sense. This is where the 4-style promise becomes plausible, because some of these materials really are cheap. Not universally $4, not universally miracle working, but cheap enough that the experiment is often worth it in the right spot. DOE and Energy Saving Trust both support this general category of fix, while also noting that results depend on the problem you are actually solving. Then the third level is where people get humbled. Sometimes the reason the room feels bad is not one crack or one sunny pane. Sometimes the whole envelope is weak, and that is when the cheap fix teaches you something even if it does not solve everything. It tells you where the real problem is. It turns comfort into a diagnosis. There is one more caveat that matters here. More sealing is not always better in every situation. Energy Saving Trust warns that if a home is already fairly airtight, extra draft proofing without proper ventilation can create air quality problems. So the goal is not to seal your house like a submarine and hope for the best. The goal is to stop obvious waste while still keeping the home healthy. And now we get to the twist that makes this whole story more interesting. Japan is not some perfect home efficiency utopia. In fact, one reason these cheap window and draft tricks matter so much is because Japan has also had plenty of homes that needed them. That is the part viral content usually skips. Because the easy version of the story is, Japan figured it out, everyone else is dumb. But the more accurate version is, Japan has some smart, practical energy habits, and at the same time, it has also been dealing with real housing efficiency weaknesses. Government-linked technical material says Japan's existing housing stock has lagged newer housing in energy-saving performance, while MLIT has been tightening standards, including mandatory compliance for new homes from April 2025. That matters because it changes how you should interpret the cheap fix advice. The lesson is not that Japan has magical houses. The lesson is that when homes are not uniformly high performance, people get very familiar with the difference between a behavior fix, a cheap patch, and a real building upgrade. And those are not the same thing. Japan's policy material makes that pretty clear. Windows matter, glazing matters, air leakage matters, insulation matters, and if those are weak, you feel it fast. MLIT and related technical materials repeatedly point to better envelope performance, better glazing, and better standards as important parts of the larger solution. So yes, a draft stopper can help. Curtains can help. Window film can help. And weather stripping can help. But none of those things are the same as a genuinely strong building envelope. They are first aid, sometimes very effective first aid, but still first aid. And honestly, that is not bad news. That is useful news. Because if a cheap fix makes a room noticeably better, that tells you something. It tells you the weak spot was local and accessible. Great. Keep the win. But if you do the cheap fixes and the room still overheats every afternoon, still feels icy near the window in winter, still forces the system to run forever, then the house is giving you information. It is telling you the problem is deeper than one strip of foam or one reflective layer on the glass. At that point, the smart move is not buying 10 more gimmicks. It is recognizing that the real issue may be the window itself, the insulation level, the leakage pattern, or the way the entire space is being conditioned. And that is where this whole Japan angle becomes genuinely valuable. Because the strongest takeaway is not copy this one weird trick. It is learn to think in layers. Layer 1, change behavior. Use the room you are actually in. Shade the glass before the room heats up. Do not waste comfort on empty space. That is exactly the logic behind cool biz, warm biz, and the shared space concepts promoted by Japan's Environment Ministry and utilities. Layer 2, patch the obvious weak points. Drafts, door gaps, badly managed sun exposure, poorly used curtains or blinds. Cheap fixes belong here. Layer 3, admit when the building itself needs help. Better glazing, better insulation, better retrofits, better standards. That is why the Japanese policy side matters. It shows the country itself is not pretending a curtain is the same thing as a good wall assembly. And that layered way of thinking is the real upgrade, because it keeps you from doing two dumb things people do all the time. 1. Blaming everything on power prices. 2. Expecting a tiny hack to solve a structural problem. Japan's real lesson is smarter than both. Not, our electricity is magically cheapest. Not, buy this miracle strip. But, handle the easiest losses first and know when you have reached the limit of what cheap fixes can do. So after all of that, here is the clean version. Japan's advantage is not some magical cheapest electricity in the G7 cheat code. And it is not one miracle product. It is a way of thinking about home comfort that starts earlier than most people start. Before you blame the power company, before you crank the AC lower, before you turn the heat higher, ask, where is the house losing the fight first? Is the sun cooking the room through the glass? Is hot air building up because the window is basically a greenhouse? Is winter air sneaking in around a door frame? Are you paying to heat or cool space nobody is even using? That is the real lesson here, and it is the part that actually transfers. So if you want one rule to take away from this whole video, it is this: shade it, seal it, then upgrade it. Shade it because if the heat never gets inside, your cooling system does less work. Seal it because if comfort is leaking out through gaps and drafts, the bill will keep climbing no matter how many thermostat tricks you try. Then upgrade it because cheap fixes are great when the problem is local, but they are not a substitute for better windows, better insulation, or a better building envelope when the whole house is weak. DOE guidance supports the cheap ceiling side, and Japanese building policy materials make clear that envelope upgrades still matter at the bigger level. And honestly, that is why this story is more useful than the viral headline. The viral version says, Japan figured out a secret. The useful version says, a lot of us are trying to solve comfort too late. We wait until the room is already hot. We wait until the draft is already annoying. We wait until the heater or AC is already working overtime. And then we fight the symptom with more energy. But the smarter move is to catch the loss at the edge of the room first, at the window, at the door, at the unused space, at the exact point where discomfort starts turning into cost. That is not flashy, but it is real, and it is probably worth more than any fake international ranking. So here is what I want you to do. Think about your own house, apartment, or room, and ask one brutally simple question. What is actually making this space expensive to keep comfortable? Is it direct sun? Is it a cold draft? Is it one bad window? Is it that you are trying to condition way more space than you really use? Drop that in the comments along with your climate, and I will tell you which fix I would test first, because that is really the point here. Not fake secrets, not miracle hacks, just the stuff that actually works.